Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 1076, 1076, March the 18th, 2020, Wednesday. Thank you so much for tuning in. Of course it is Wednesday. Of course you know that's the day that I take out the trash and have some chicken. And I will be doing some chicken tonight, and hopefully I won't forget to take out the trash. Yeah, if they're even going to come, who knows? The way things are. Hopefully, Rumpke, my local trash pickup guys, hopefully they're not off schedule. Hopefully they'll still be picking up the trash tomorrow, because I'll certainly be putting it out. Now, let's go ahead and get into the news of the day. There's a lot of things to talk about, other than coronavirus, although that's hit a little bit of that, but mostly other things that you might be interested in. Let's start right here. Well, it looks like John Durham has charged a man named Robert Phelps with threatening to assault and murder Adam the Bug-Eyed Fool Schiff. It looks like he's facing up to 15 years in prison. So it looks like what this guy did is it looks like Adam the Bug-Eyed Fool Schiff has a website where you can schedule meetings with him or members of his staff if you have an issue. It looks like this guy went on to his schedule a meeting website and basically threatened to kill him. Not a good idea. Of course, they document the fact that this guy is a Republican and belongs to a couple of really sort of out there Republican groups I've never even heard of before, but they listed 3 of them. I've never heard of them. But apparently this guy is a whack job, and it doesn't surprise me that he would be charged, other than the fact that I'm a little curious as to why other members of Congress who've been seriously threatened, how come they have never been charged, or maybe they have been and it's just not being reported. But for some reason they're certainly reporting on this story, maybe because it's John Durham, or I don't know, maybe because it's the Bug-Eyed Fool. I'm not really sure why this case is that much different. Again, I know Matt Yates, somebody threatened Matt Yates with murder back about a year ago, and I don't recall that person being arrested. But regardless of the fact, John Durham has charged this guy with several counts. Could be looking at 15 years in prison. He's threatening to assault and murder Adam the Bug-Eyed Fool Schiff. We really don't want to kill Schiff. We just want to get rid of him, politically speaking. You kind of want to leave this guy around just so you never forget how wacky these people are. I certainly would like to defeat him in his race for re-election. That would be good, but no, we probably shouldn't be trying to assault and murder people we disagree with, even if it is the Bug-Eyed Fool. Now, in this article, they also take a little bit of a dig at Durham, and I can kind of understand that. They're talking about the fact that the coronavirus is likely going to slow down or delay his investigation, and they do, again, make a point that I hear being made time and time again by people criticizing Durham. And that's fine if you want to criticize Durham, that's okay. But the idea that they're criticizing, well, he still hasn't interviewed Comey, and he hasn't interviewed Brennan, and he hasn't interviewed Clapper, and this type of thing. Well, I don't know about you guys, but, if I'm Durham and I'm doing this investigation and I've got all this documentation and I've got other witnesses, and Comey and Clapper and Brennan are high-value targets in the investigation. They're actually the people that you're going after, right? I mean, all the evidence points to the fact that these guys were 3 of the top players in the coup. And if I were Durham, I don't know that I would even interview these guys. First of all, they know they're targets of an investigation, so if you do go to interview them, they're going to show up with a lawyer, and the lawyer is going to look over and say, okay, my client is going to exercise his Fifth Amendment. He's not going to talk to you. See you in court. So that's probably what you're going to get out of those guys anyway. And even if they did talk to you, they're going to lie to you, all right? So, I mean, they're not going to sit there and admit their guilt. So I don't know if I were Durham, if I would even interview him. I'd just wait until I've got my evidence together, put him in front of a grand jury. Because if you do interview him, you kind of show your hand as far as where your investigation is, where it's going, and where their area of vulnerability is. I don't think I would interview any of those 3 guys. If you have the documentation and you have other witnesses to testify against them, and you have all this other stuff you've brought together through your investigation, I don't think I would interview him until I put him in front of a grand jury. That's when I interview him. I want to catch them off guard as much as possible. And I don't want to waste my time having them sit down with their lawyer and say, okay, well, he's decided he's not going to talk. Have a nice day. See ya. So I don't think that those guys are going to cooperate or answer any questions. I don't think that they would tell the truth even if they did. I don't know why you would interview any of these guys, and if you did, it would be one of the very last things that you do. Only when you've got all your ducks in a row would you actually sit down and interview any of these three guys, and I don't think Durham is there yet. He would have to be at the point where he is done with his investigation, and then all he wants to do is press on Comey, Clapper, Brennan, and maybe see if one of them will turn, maybe see if one of them will come clean, something like that. But these are arrogant son of a bitches who believe that the deep state has got their back. And I don't see any of these three guys rolling over. In fact, I see these three guys proclaiming their innocence even after them being frog-marched to jail, having been just found guilty on like 30 counts. So I don't have a problem with the fact that Durham hasn't interviewed these guys yet. It doesn't surprise me. So I have no problem with that. I'm going to hold my fire until Durham has completed his investigation. Yeah, I would expect that this coronavirus probably is slowing down things and may delay things a little while. That doesn't make me happy. Obviously, I want this thing to get wrapped up, but I want it to be done right. And I'm most interested about the end result. So I'll hold back on my criticism for now until Durham is basically done. We'll see what Durham does, and then I'll comment when that happens. But at this time, I really don't know. But obviously, he's already admitted that he disagrees with Horowitz, that the Operation Crossfire was properly predicated. He is admitted through the DOJ spokesman that he is conducting a criminal investigation, which means he's already found the crimes. And his reputation suggests that he will charge people who he's found committed crimes. So I'm going to keep my powder dry at this point and wait and see what happens. When the time comes, if I think that he dropped the ball, I'll be the first one to blast him. But for now, I'm just going to let the man work. And once he's done, then I'll give my opinion. Okay, well, we have some newly discovered documents that reveal that Obama DOJ officials privately told Uncle Bob the Executioner Mueller and the Hillary donor posse that they were alarmed by the treatment of Michael Flynn. And these documents also show, number one, that Mueller's Hillary donor posse accepted Flynn's guilty plea, even though FBI agents told the DOJ that they thought Flynn was not lying. Also, that DOJ officials thought prosecuting Flynn under the Logan Act was a stretch, and that Flynn was lured into an interview under false pretenses, and that they did not believe he was in legal jeopardy. So let's go through this a little bit. So Silly Sally Yates should be sweating bullets right now, because Silly Sally Yates told Comey that the FBI agents interviewing Flynn was problematic because it violated White House protocol. So what happens is that, as we know, we've seen that clip of James Comey being interviewed, and he's telling at some forum with an audience and a media reporter, he says, yeah, I sent a couple guys over. I knew the White House was in disarray. They weren't quite all together yet, didn't have all their procedures in place. Saw a good opportunity. So, yeah, I sent a couple FBI agents over, to set up Flynn. And what we're finding out now is that before he sent those agents over, he contacted Silly Sally Yates and said, hey, I got an opportunity. I'm going to send the FBI agents over. And Peter's been stroking us was one of those agents. He was the primary questioner. He said, I'm going to send a couple FBI agents over to question Flynn. And it was at that point that Yates told Comey, hey, that could be a bit problematic because it violates protocol, White House protocol. You're supposed to go through the White House protocols, which means that legal people at the White House would decide whether or not that's a good idea or not, and whether or not there needs to be legal counsel present from the White House counsel, whether the person you're interviewing should have private counsel. These things are all taken into consideration. Comey knows this and admitted that he knew this, but that he took advantage of a situation with the new president who wasn't familiar with the protocols and a new administration that hadn't quite gotten their feet on the ground yet, and he took advantage of the situation so that he could run the setup on Flynn. So Silly Sally Yates was totally aware of the game that was being run, and that occurred on, Comey made the call to Yates on January the 24th of 2017, and that's when Comey told Yates what he was going to do. Now, I do believe that is the exact same day. So, in fact, it was the very day that Comey decided to send over the FBI agents that he called Yates and told her. And that's what she told him. Hey, that could be problematic. It could violate protocol. Now, the problem for Silly Sally is that she was on CNN after she had been fired in the late spring of 2017. And she said that firing Comey, and she's talking about the fact that Trump had fired Comey, she says firing Comey was a really troubling situation, and that there were serious questions about the timing and motivation of the president's actions. She also said that Comey was a straight shooter and candid. A straight shooter and candid? Jimmy the Weasel was anything but a straight shooter and candid, and Silly Sally knew it. And despite the fact that this whole setup went down, and she knew how it went down, and she knew why it went down, she still jumped on the team, on the coup team, and was one of the lead players. Her and McCabe were the lead players in prosecuting Flynn. Setting up Flynn for Mueller to go after Flynn. Silly Sally, go back and watch her interview, her and McCabe's, not interview, but testimony in front of Congress. And look at her attitude there, look at her attitude on CNN, and then go back to what she actually said when she was contacted by Comey. And she went along with the Russia hoax, knowing good and well that it was a hoax. She knew it was all bullshit. By the time she was fired, by the time Comey was fired, that was 4 months after the FBI had already determined that there was no Russia-Trump collusion and that Flynn was clean. Keep that in mind. Silly Sally knew all of this. She was the deputy AG. She knew all of this, and she joined the coup team. Lock her up. I have no sympathy for Silly Sally. She also said in that interview on CNN that Flynn was in a serious compromise situation and that the Russians had leverage on him. So these are comments that she's making, saying that Flynn was in a serious compromise situation, that the Russians had leverage on him, even though she knew that he had been exonerated 4 months earlier, or certainly should have known. She was a deputy AG. And she certainly had to know how the setup occurred, how he was on vacation, and how they made that call with the Obama decided to kick out the Russian diplomats, knowing good and well that would trigger a call from Kislyak to Flynn, who, as the incoming National Security Advisor, has every right to discuss anything with about what the new administration is going to do in terms of their policy toward Russia and what they might do about sanctions. Flynn did nothing wrong. Flynn did nothing wrong, and Silly Sally knew it. She's got a lot of explaining to do. But we also had Mary McCord. She says that the FBI did not give Flynn the usual notification that he could be charged with the crime if he misled the agents. That's right. He was never told. It was a setup by Comey. McCord also says that the FBI's interview of Flynn was to determine whether or not Flynn had a clandestine relationship with Russia, knowing good and well that the Kislyak phone call was a setup plot by the FBI and the Obama administration, and they knew that the previous things that were going on with Flynn that had been brought to their attention, brought by Stefan Halper, the fat man, was in fact a setup, that he was having this affair with Lakova, who was supposedly a Russian agent. They knew all of that was bullshit. So they knew all this was bullshit. This is all total bullshit. McCord knows it. McCabe knows it. Yates knows it. Comey knows it. The whole gang. This is all bullshit. They were going after Flynn because Flynn had serious disagreements with the Obama administration on Syria policy, on the Iran deal, on other issues, and he was targeted back in 2014, and everything from that time up until 2017, when he had become Trump's pick for incoming national security advisor. That's when they went down and locked down on him to go after him, because they couldn't allow him to get that position and have him get in there and expose the previous administration's crimes and to clean up the mess that is the intelligence community. That's why he was taken out. And I believe the facts will bear that out, Mr. Durham. FBI agents also told McCabe, after interviewing him on January the 24th, 2017, that Flynn seemed credible in his interview. Even Peter's been stroking us, who was one of the two agents conducting the interview, said that Flynn appeared truthful during the interview. More damning information on the deep state coup plotters. Now let's move on to the next explosive bombshell. So a little bit, I just want to follow up a little bit and drill down a little bit on the story I talked about yesterday about the fact that the court has decided to allow, as if they need to, allow the DOJ to drop their charges against Concord Management. In other words, the 13 Russian trolls. Supposedly the 13 Russian trolls work for this company, Concord Management. So, as I said yesterday, Concord Management was supposedly the company that the so-called 13 Russian trolls worked for, and they were charged with interfering in the 2016 election. That is what Uncle Bob the Executioner went after them for. Now, as we know, they simply were not able to provide the evidence to back up their claims, and after dragging this thing out for a couple of years and having these attorneys representing Concord Management make them look like fools, they were forced to drop the charges. Now, why is this important? This is important because, remember, the whole point of the so-called Mueller probe was to find out about the Russians interfering in the election and to see if maybe people in the Trump campaign have been a part of that. Well, so the first part of that is the Russians interfering in the election. Well, the only real case that Mueller had, because all the other cases against Manafort, against Papadopoulos, against Cohen, those were all for totally different things. None of that had anything to do with Russia interfering in the election or there being any collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. The entire case and proof that the Russians were interfering in the election rested on really two things. Number one, the DNC hack, and number two, the Russian troll farm. So now the Russian troll farm case has been blown up. This Russian troll farm case, Concord Management, was supposed to give credibility to the Mueller collusion hoax. It was supposed to justify his investigation. Mueller is looking into Russian interference in the election, and it's the 13 Russian trolls at the troll farm who are really the main thing here, and maybe Trump was colluding with them or something. So this is really the whole Russia interfering in the election case. It's two things, DNC hack and the Russian troll farm. So now that the Russian troll farm has been blown up, and it's not just been blown up, but the judge has actually ordered Mueller and the DOJ to cease and desist any more accusations that Concord Management, the Russian troll farm, had anything to do with interfering in the election. Not only that, something else that comes out in these court hearings is the amount of money that was spent by the Russians at the Russian troll farm running memes. And a lot of this actually occurred after the election. Do you want to know the big number, the number of dollars now that they've determined that the 13 Russian trolls spent creating memes during the 2016 election? You want to know the number of dollars that they spent? We've heard a lot of numbers out there, 300,000, $500,000, 5 million, 20 million, all these kinds of numbers about how much money that the Russians, the Russian trolls, and remember, the Russian troll farm guys, the 13 Russian trolls, were supposedly working with the Russian, or for or with the Russian government. But we find out through these court hearings that the grand total of dollars that the DOJ was able to find that the Russian trolls spent on memes during the 2016 election was a grand total of $2,390. $2,390. That is about what the taxpayers paid for about 1 hour of the Mueller team's work. That's about 1 hour's worth of work. And the Rotten Reverend and Trump were probably spending $1 million a week on social media. Yet the trolls spent $2,390 on some memes. And the funny thing about this court case, I remember the very first hearing that they had, and the lawyer representing Concord Management, the Russian trolls, goes up, and of course the DOJ reads their charges, the court reads the charges, and then the lawyer for the Russian trolls goes, well, you know, the first big problem you have in this case is that he says that this company that you're alleging did these things, Concord Management, the Russian troll farm, this company did not even exist as a legal entity during the time period that it's alleged that they committed the crimes. That was the very first hearing, going back 2 years, more than 2 years now. That was the very first hearing in this case. That's the day that it should have been ended right there. But the DOJ had to drag it out and drag it out and drag it out and drag it out because they needed to keep this facade that there was a serious investigation by the Mueller team into Russians interfering in the 2016 election when they knew it was total bullshit. So here's just another big piece of total bullshit blown out. And of course, so we have the Trump-Russia collusion blown out. Then we had the second leg, which is the Russian trolls. Now that's been blown out. The only thing left halfway standing is that the Russians hacked the DNC and gave that stuff to WikiLeaks. And I believe that in time, that too is going to be blown up, which means the entire predicate for everything that occurred with the coup plotters will be blown up. And I hope Durham will blow up the last one. He should easily be able to do it, because CrowdStrike is basically out there now backing away from everything. And another thing that these lawyers pointed out very early on in the case is that lots and lots of people run memes and get involved in trying to persuade people during elections. Never in the history of the country has the FBI or a special counsel ever tried to charge people with a crime for simply posting memes, trying to move people's opinion or persuade people one way or another in an election. It happens in every election by all sorts of people, and tens of millions, hundreds of millions, billions probably of dollars are spent. And here these guys spent $2,390. Most of it was after the election was over. They were never inside the United States or operating within the United States. They were over in Eastern Europe, and there's no evidence whatsoever that they were working for the Russian government. That was never proven. And in fact, they weren't even a legitimate company, hadn't even been formed at the time when some of these memes were posted. So there you go. Another epic fail by Uncle Bob the Executioner and the coup plotters. We have a follow-up now from Judicial Watch on this appeal that the Rotten Reverend Clinton is attempting to put off having to testify. And again, as has been made clear by several different people who've commented on this, legal people, is that they don't think that this is going to fly, and they would assume that Clinton's lawyers would know that this is not going to fly. So the only thing that they could be doing here is trying to delay. The Rotten Reverend Clinton doesn't want this happening right now. If she can get power and become president, then she can make this go away. And that's what she's trying to do, is delay this until, in her mind, she believes that she will capture the nomination after she takes Biden out, and that she will beat Trump, and that she'll be able to put all this stuff to bed. But it's not going to work out for the Right and Reverend. Trust me. So Judicial Watch is now telling us that what they filed was a Mandamus brief, or a Mandamus action, to the Court of Appeals. And there's three things that they're specifically trying to say in this Mandamus briefing. One is that the Right and Reverend Clinton's legal team is trying to say that the records that Judicial wants, the records that Judicial Watch wants, is they are not subject to FOIA. Because they were never in the system. Yes, they were never in the system because you ran a private email server that kept them out of the system. Oh, man. Can you believe the arrogance? And the other thing is, they're saying that the case is moot and that there is no controversy over what happened. She had a private server. We all know that. It's not controversial. She turned over 300,000 emails. What's the problem? I don't think it's going to fly. And she also says in this briefing, that, well, it doesn't say this in the briefing, but this is what Judicial Watch says that a mandamus action is meant to do. This would be the criteria to use a mandamus filing in the court to get a case overturned or overruled. A mandamus action, the criteria would be when an extraordinary remedy that should only be used is exceptional circumstances of peculiar emergency or public importance. You should only file this type of an action if you need an extraordinary remedy, and it should only be used in exceptional circumstances of a peculiar emergency or public importance. What does this basically mean that the Right Reverend Clinton, how she sees this? Well, she thinks she's special. She thinks she's above the law. That's essentially how she's looking at it, and why she thinks that the mandamus action would apply to her. I don't think even the left-wing appeals court is going to buy that one. Well, we had some interesting news also yesterday over at CNN of a kind of a hell freezing over moment. And that's when Dana Bash, who's not exactly a Trump fan, Dana Bash praised President Trump on his leadership of the coronavirus crisis in the last several days. She said, quote, "He's the kind of leader people need and yearn for in times of crisis." And she is getting absolutely abused by her left-wing fanatical friends. But she's correct. And what scares the Democrats most about this coronavirus, are trying to use it against Trump to hurt him, thinking that this is the nail in his coffin that will allow them to defeat him. But here's the big problem they have. When you have something like this happen, it has a tendency to bring the country together. And a lot of the infighting stops. And, of course, the Democrats, the demo-commies, have been involved in and engaged in this resistance since day one. And what this does is this throws a huge wrench into the spokes of the resistance, because they can't resist as they've been doing up to this point anymore, especially on this issue of the coronavirus. They have to cooperate on this issue, or they'll be seen in a very bad light. So this coronavirus has forced Democrats to cooperate and work with the administration to come up with some measures to deal with the problem we have. And so this flies directly in the face of the resistance. It kind of shuts down the resistance. And here's another thing. The way this thing works is, it's like if you have a brother and you and your brother fight all the time. You may get pissed off and beat each other up all the time, but if you're out playing and some other kid starts to beat on your brother, you're going to come over and defend your brother. And it could happen, you could be in a town. You could dislike somebody in your town or have an issue with another school in your town, but if someone comes from another town and attacks you or the person that you were previously attacking from the other school or someone else in town, you're immediately going to jump to that person's side because you see a foreign person coming from the outside and coming into your territory. So this is how people generally operate. So when you have a massive crisis like we have with the coronavirus going on, it has a tendency to bring people together. They have a tendency to circle the wagons, and they don't see Trump as the enemy anymore. They kind of see the virus as the enemy, and it's coming from an outside place, China specifically. But you could look at it as like a shadow enemy that nobody can really see, but everyone knows it's there. So this has a tendency to bring people together. And what this will do is this will neuter any efforts at the resistance. And that's a death knell for the Democrats, because their whole plan was to make this argument throughout this season, the election season, that the country is deeply divided because of Trump, when in fact the country is not really deeply divided at all. It's just a media propaganda campaign and cooperation with the Democrats to make people think that the country is really divided over Trump, when in fact it's the media and the demo commies creating all the friction and chaos with their propaganda to try to sell the idea that the country is divided when it's really not. And what I mean by that is 90% of the people in this country get up every day and go to work. They work right alongside people who are of different political views, different race, different religion, different ethnic background, the whole 9 yards, and people get along just fine. If people were to turn off their TV and stop listening to Democrats, we'd all be in love with each other. So the whole resistance is about to get blown up because of the coronavirus. Like I said, there's going to be a lot of very good things that end up coming out of the coronavirus thing once we get through it. For the next few weeks, maybe the next 2 months or so, things are going to suck pretty bad. I'll admit it. But once that's over, the markets are going to come back. The economy is going to come back. It'll be summertime. The elections will go on. Everything will go on with normal. And everything will recover. And the resistance will have been beaten completely down. And Trump will come out of this looking very, very good. And that's a death knell to the demo commies, and they know it. And that's why some of them are still trying to resist. But they just make themselves look really, really bad. And this is what Dana Bash understands. She understands this. But it won't stop CNN and MSNBC from still bringing people on who will continue to try to say crazy things about Trump and the Republicans and how they're handling this and all the rest. So you can expect more of this, but ultimately, in the end, as I said, when this is all said and done, this will become Trump's finest hour. And it will have a lot to do with why he will be reelected in a landslide, not to mention the problems that China Joe has. Speaking of China Joe, it looks like he is blowing out Bernie Sanders in Florida and Illinois. And now we have gotten the final results in from Washington. Biden did win Washington. That was Bernie's last stronghold. He lost there in Washington. He's getting blown out in Florida. He's getting blown out in Illinois. Of the 6 states that were supposed to vote, 3 of them canceled. We're still waiting for one more state. I think it's Arizona. They did go ahead with their vote. We haven't got the results in yet. But at this point, Florida and Illinois blowouts for Biden. Sanders has already made a statement indicating he's not dropping out. And why is that? Well, because Commie Bernie is being told by his advisors that Biden has to go. We still have, let's see, March, April, May, June. We still have a little over 4 months before the convention. And there's nobody in the Biden, in the Bernie camp, and a lot of other people who believe that Biden can go another 4 months without it being obvious that he's losing his mind. And, of course, the Right Reverend Clinton is now losing her mind. Because for her to move on Biden and start hitting Biden, she needs Bernie to go. So by Bernie sticking around, he's screwing the Rotten Reverend. The Rotten Reverend can't take down Biden until Bernie's gone. Once Bernie's gone, then she can take down Biden. But for now, she has to allow her folks there to DCCC, the DNC, and the Democrats to pump Biden up as if he's a great candidate, knowing good and well that as soon as Bernie's gone, they're going to take him down at the direction of the Rotten Reverend. But she can't turn and move on that until Bernie's gone. So he's really pissing off the Rotten Reverend. Well, like I said, my message to you, Mr. Durham, is that we've now eliminated two of the three hoax reasons for the whole Trump-Russia hoax and the coup. We were told it was Trump-Russia collusion. We know now it's been proven there was not. You know that, Mr. Durham. We also were told that the Russian trolls were responsible for interfering in the 2016 election, and that was the entire evidence against the Russians. That's now been shot down, Mr. Durham, and you know that as well. And finally, all we have remaining is the Russians hacked the DNC and gave that shit to WikiLeaks. And my guess is, Mr. Durham, you can put that one to bed very quickly as well. I certainly hope you do your job, sir. I'll be watching. Thank you so much for tuning in. See you guys tomorrow. Bye.